All right, I'm ready. Leaving the Gregorian calendar behind and embracing the 13-month calendar. Now, more and more, I think people are beginning to recognize how much of a distortion following the Gregorian calendar has become. There's a lot of talk about the matrix, and many of us are trying to figure out how do we exit the matrix, you know? Do we stop watching news? Do we stop reading the newspaper? Do we stop going to the jobs? What do we do? But now, more and more, it is becoming apparent that moving away from the 13-month calendar has been one of the most detrimental things for humanity. Now, I'm going to encourage everyone to go and do your little research on the Gregorian calendar and where it came from, the Julian calendar, where that came from, and then do your research on the 13-month calendar. The 13-month calendar involves 28 days each. And if you know anything about the woman's menstrual cycle, you will know that it is 28 days in length. So ancient populations and groups of people were aligned with natural time. They were looking at the moon cycle. So there were 13 moons in a year. What has happened with the Gregorian calendar is that they have compressed it into 12 months in a year, and they've made these crazy number of days. Sometimes it's 29 days, sometimes it's 28 days, sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 31. That calendar was designed to coincide with the industrial age, agrarian sector, and all sorts of other things that had to do with generating wealth and structuring a society that conforms to the time that they have set. What it means is that we are no longer aligned to natural time, to cosmic time. Now, one of the most popular, or two of the most popular calendars that are 13-month calendars are the Mayan calendar and the Kemetic calendar. And those calendars are pretty much configured to align with the cosmos and the moon cycles. So I strongly recommend for us to truly exit the matrix, because the matrix is bound by time. And, I think it took a little while for people to realize that a simple tool, I would like to call it a weapon, but we're going to call it a tool to be politically correct. A simple tool like the calendar is what has entrapped us in this matrix that we're all saying we need to get out of. So one quick way to exit the matrix is to start using the 13-month calendar. Let me give you an example. It's very interesting. I live here in Jamaica, and in November, on the Gregorian calendar, we were visited by a group of Igbos. November 2nd, to be exact, I interacted with them. And then on December 2nd, I interacted with a group of Dogons. And both of them, the primary thing they presented, or what stayed with me, was reference to their calendars. Those interactions were so powerful that I decided I am not even going to continue with the Gregorian calendar anymore. I am right away moving into the use of those ancient 13-month calendars. And what happened? I found out that, for example, January is the 11th month. And when I say January, I don't mean January 1 to 30th because that's Gregorian. I mean December 26th to January 22 on the Igbo calendar is what they consider the 11th month. It's a little bit different for the Kemetic. I don't know the exact timing. I think it's January 6th to February 6th. That's their 11th month. But essentially, the 11th month is this January period, the 12th month is the February period, and the 13th month is the March period. And if you really look at the seasons, you will see that March is about the time of spring. So anything you sow in spring is going to flourish in summer because the sun is becoming higher in the sky and the days are getting longer. So if we just follow that rhythm, then we will know that we begin afresh or begin anew around the springtime. Many things around the Gregorian calendar has created distortions. The celebrations around the Gregorian calendar, a lot of them are pagan, and the definition of pagan is another tradition or another religion outside of yours. But a lot of the holidays that we celebrate, starting from Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, are holidays that have origins in things that are perhaps not as savory as we would like to think they are. There are lots of distortions, and it is our duty to search for them and stop just accepting what we are being told about these days, these holidays, these holy days. Also, the naming of the different months in the Gregorian calendar have, references to all sorts of Greek mythology that perhaps also are quite unsavory if we looked into them. So we really need to be careful and we need to do our research. I can go into the details for you, but I want to train people who are listening to me to do the research because remember, we're moving into an age now where AI is telling us everything. And I don't want you to fall into the trap of listening to what I say and calling it, the gospel. I want you to do your research, go down that rabbit hole based on what I have told you here, and know that some of the names of the months and some of the celebrations during the month are having us celebrate something that we do not know, and further hinging us to the matrix. So let's do our research. Let's go research a couple of calendars and let's see which ones fit best with your lifestyle and what you want to achieve. Personally, I'm looking at 2 calendars. I know I'm going to have to trim it down to 1. I'm looking at both the Igbo calendar and the Kemetic calendar. And what's interesting, for the month of January 2025, I decided to use both. And what I found was January 5 was the 11th day of the 11th month in the Igbo calendar. And January 18th is the 11th day of the 11th month on the Kemetic calendar. So what I do, knowing that information, is that I double up and I do very specific meditations and grounding and silence on those days. Now, the January 5th, 11/11 portal already passed, and I can tell you what happened. We had over 10 solar flares between Saturday night and Sunday morning, which means that just because we tapped into that 1111 portal, we were able to get the benefit of the light codes being showered on planet Earth. So for 2025, double up. Do your research on those 13-month calendars. Choose one and follow it for the rest of the Gregorian calendar 2025. And let's have a talk next Gregorian calendar year. See how it has shifted your life. Is toxic independence promoting a loneliness crisis at this time? My answer would be yes, especially among young Black women all over the world. What's happening is there was a push some decades ago for women to start working. And there was also a simultaneous situation where, especially among the African American men, a lot more of them were being pushed into the penal institutions. So technically there's a shortage of good men. And so, and I'm generalizing here, there are no absolutes in this conversation. So what we have is a situation where there is a bit of a shortage of good men, in their words, and a proliferation of men that are not necessarily stepping up to the plate because the women have taken on a greater burden in terms of raising children and providing in the home. Now, because what has happened is that there are very many cases of men that are tagging on to households and being carried by women, there's a whole thrust among women to say, listen, let's not even bother to have a man. We'll do it all on our own. I'll do bad all by myself, as it were. And so what we're seeing is a situation where women are saying, listen, I can pay my bills. I can take care of my car note. I can raise my children myself. I don't need you. And so they're just looking at it from a material and financial perspective, not understanding that the man and the woman are supposed to be together. They're supposed to balance each other and counterbalance each other. So it's more than just finance and material. The feminine principle requires a masculine principle to balance things out. A child requires both the masculine and the feminine principle to raise that child correctly. When you have a single mother or a single father household, there is bound to be an emotional imbalance in the child. Have you ever noticed when the mother is shouting at the child and the child is not listening? The minute the father steps in and they hear that bass voice, suddenly they can hear it. They can't hear the mother's high-pitched shrieks and shouts. But as soon as that booming voice comes in, there is something in the brain that is hardwired to listen. The child needs both. They need to hear the masculine and they need to hear the feminine principle. So what has happened over decades is that you have imbalanced children going out into the world and being imbalanced. And so when it comes to relationship time, the imbalance sets in. And so now we have such a skew that we have a situation where women are actually saying, my mom was a single mom. She didn't need no man. I'm going to do it too. I don't need no man. They have a child, but they realize They can't put up with a man, so they rather do things on their own. But what is happening is that we really do have a chronic situation of loneliness in people's lives. People need to have people around them. People need to have the warmth, the security, and just another person to bounce ideas off of, to reinforce a situation, right? Now, what's happening is that lots of good men are also not getting good women because this artificial singleness, independence is driving women to create a set of criteria for what a good man is. Just the other day, a young woman came and we were chatting, and she's like, I can't find a good man. And I said to her, what is a good man? And she said, good job, he has a house, nice car, he dresses well, and he has taste, and he treats me well. He sends me on holidays, buys me nice gifts. And I said to her, maybe the reason why you're not getting a good man is because your priority list is skewed in the way that society has projected for the definition of a good man to be. How about a man that is ambitious, driven, caring, considerate, emotionally intelligent, available, emotionally available, considerate, loving, and capable of rearing a child in partnership with you? How about that as a definition? And she looked at me in shock, like, wow, I never even thought of that. I said, yes, you didn't think of it because society is promoting this other thing. I don't know if most of you are familiar with this new reality show where there's this balloon and people start popping the balloon as soon as the man or the woman comes out. And we've seen quite a number of them where the women just popped the balloon before the man even opened his mouth. And when you ask them, why did you pop the balloon? Oh, I didn't like how he dressed. And so what's happening with this toxic independence is that we have a very superficial perspective being projected. You know, women just want a man that's tall, dark, handsome, well-dressed, has a great car, a huge house, a six-figure income. And then when they do get into relationships with those perfect men, those men are emotionally and mentally unavailable because they are consumed with maintaining the six-figure income, the beautiful house, the beautiful car. And some of them sell their souls to keep those things. So what you are in a relationship with is a soulless man or woman. So we really have to rethink what we consider a good relationship or a good man or a good woman. Because right now, everything is distorted. And the only way that we can not fall prey to the distortion is to open our eyes and use our intuition, because we are not meant to be single. We are not meant to be alone. We're not meant to be independent. We are meant to interact and integrate with other like-minded persons. Ponderings on all the immigrants being sent home by the North American countries and the European countries. Are we being protected by the ancestors. There are many people who have believed for many years, by design, that huge financial opportunities exist in the developed countries. And so many have risked life and limb in small boats to cross over seas and oceans to get to the promised land. And when they get there, there is the proverbial milk and honey. And many are able to live lives that are infinitely better than where they're coming from. There are also a few that have unfortunately fell into traps where they get sold into modern day slavery and prostitution and so on. But for the most part, most persons can show that leaving their land and going to America or going to Canada or going to the Middle East has been the most wonderful thing that has happened to them from a financial perspective. But are they choosing to chase the material and lose their soul in the process? That's a question to query. Many find themselves, even though they're able to make more money than they were able to make in their homeland. For example, I'm from Jamaica. A lot of people leave Jamaica and they go abroad and they do very well. But what does very well mean? Very well might mean 3 jobs, 4 jobs, struggling in the snow, going to work at 3 a.m. when it's dark, coming home when it's dark, not being able to enjoy the physical, material things that they've gained. You know? Now, a lot has happened in 2024, and there are changes afoot, not just in the US, but all over the world. And what we are seeing is a trend where the developed countries are basically saying, you need to go back home. All over Europe, they're trying to send all the immigrants back. All over the US and even in Canada, they are looking to send the immigrants back to their homelands. Should we resist it, or should we look at this rejection as a redirection that could possibly save our hides? And let me tell you why I say that. There is going to be a lot of shifting in this coming period. And when I say shifting, I'm talking about geopolitically, economically, financially, and spiritually. And perhaps it is that some of us need to be back in the land of our births to ride out this shifting that is taking place. Let us all look for a moment. We're all moving to different parts of the world for different reasons. And perhaps one might have left one area in pursuit of financial gains. And that's good. You want to feed your family. You want to send money back home for your family. But perhaps the time has come for you, now that you have amassed a certain amount of resources, to go back home and take with you the perspectives and the exposure that you've had to different ways of doing things. Take it back home and see what you can bring home to benefit your community and your family, what you can teach them that you have learned. So instead of resisting, I believe very strongly that there is a divine timing and a divine design behind us, for example, as melanated people being sent back home to our homelands, whether our homelands are in the Caribbean or it's on the continent. We should not resist. We should not fight. We should understand that perhaps this is our ancestors' way of protecting us from something that we should not experience. The truth is, in the coming weeks, months, years, there is going to be a shift, but there's going to be two separate realities taking place. And I know this is a little bit of a stretch, but stay with me. The New World Order is being pushed, and there is no secret anymore. They want to collapse the financial sectors and certain economies to bring in the New World Order. But parallel to the New World Order is what is being touted as New Earth. And New Earth is exactly the opposite of the New World Order. The New World Order is about control, domination, greed, manipulation, subjugation. New Earth is about freedom, sovereignty, alignment with natural time, alignment with natural cycles, eating naturally, keeping the body healthy and strong, using natural foods, fruits, nature, and so on. Perhaps the very act of sending you back home is placing you to be more aligned with the New Earth experience rather than the New World Order experience. And here's the thing. The New World Order is going to have the carrots dangling. The digital currency, the access to more money, the access to a job, the access to housing and fancy electric cars, automated, smart cities, and so on. And some people are going to be attracted to that glitter and that technology-driven lifestyle. But it's a trap. And so think very carefully in the next couple of months as to what you will choose. Will you choose the glitzy, glossy, high-tech, fast life, or will you take the slow, easy, free life that is not time-bound? Right? A lot of us are going to fall into the trap of going with the glitzy, technology, fancy lifestyle. But when you choose, you choose. And when you choose, you're going to be in that situation for a long time. So choose well. Think about it again. Do the research. Don't just follow the narrative that is trending most on your devices, because AI is designed to get everyone getting the same narrative and falling into a trap. Do your research, follow your intuition, and make decisions that will promote your lineage being around in the next generation. Are you able to distinguish AI, an AI human and an AI interaction, digital interaction, from a human interaction? That is a question that is now front and center all over social media and in the real world. There are actually some social media influencers that are AI generated humans, as in they don't even exist. They're digitally created and they are saying the right things and they are attracting large numbers of followers. They don't exist. And this is disturbing on many levels, because it means that we've transitioned from reality into virtual reality, and some people don't know. And then the question is, when people find out, are they okay with it? Because guess what? There are some people that are very comfortable having a AI generated, a digital girlfriend who says the right thing to them and they have great conversations and so on. That is how much out of alignment we as humans are, that we would be satisfied with a virtual reality friend than going out and finding a real human connection. It's very disturbing, and I'm going to challenge everybody who is listening to this to go to some of your favorite TikTok pages and go to some of your favorite Instagram pages and all the other social media that you watch, even your YouTube channels, and see if you can tell the difference between a human voice and an AI generated voice. A human face with hairline and eyes versus a AI generated. Because let me tell you, the newer ones are it's almost indistinguishable. You cannot tell, right? Now I want you to also think about all those YouTube channels that you follow, the ones that are faceless, that just have AI generated images or mandalas or a photo. Are you actually listening to a person, or are you listening to AI generated content? And should you trust a person, an influencer, social media influencer who is reading from an AI generated script? And we can find them, because a lot of our TikTok favorites, you'll go to 6, 7, 8 of them and they are saying exactly the same thing. They are reading from a script. Do we want to be leading our lives influenced by persons that are reading from a script? Is there a reason why there is a script generated and why everyone is rehashing and regurgitating the same narrative over and over? Pay attention, because we saw this during the pandemic, where every single radio station and television station and network was reading from the same script. And a lot of people didn't realize. A few people did, but most people didn't. Look at some of the products that you're buying, some of the supplements that you're taking, some of the health programs that you are signing up to buy, and see if those are genuine creations of the person that you're buying it from, or is it part of a hierarchy, what they call marketing triangle. I don't know what you call it. Can you now trust those links, connections, and even the products? Because now you know that those products, yes, they're there to help you, but the primary goal of the whole marketing scheme is for someone or some group of people to get very wealthy from your vulnerabilities. So I want you to really step back over the next couple of weeks, months, and start to analyze all your social media platforms. My recommendation is to stay away from the ones where you can't see the face. Work with the ones where you see the person. You can see when they're in a bad mood. You can see when they didn't get a good night's sleep because the hair don't look so good and the face don't look as cute. The lipstick color different. The skin tone is different because they had, stress in their life. Those are real people. Social media is going to morph into something that is completely digital, just like the music has become, where they're actually able to program subliminal messages into the music. There are going to be subliminal messages coming through the AI generated voices, subliminal messages that we don't even know are there, but are influencing our behaviors and our children's behaviors and even our health. It's that deep. It is that deep. Take care, look for real people, and try to stick with the real humans right now. A little discussion on how our spiritual lives are affected by the moon cycles. The sun and the moon have always been a huge part of how ancient civilizations lived, how they operated, how they interacted, how they celebrated, how they farmed, how they chose their dates and their times to go to war, how they chose the times and dates to plant their crops and also when to harvest their crops, when to bear children, when to cut their hair, when to do certain rituals. It's always been a part of how different groups have operated over the millennia. So the moon has been a very big part of it. The sun was a very big part of some of the um, other civilizations, but the moon has been a more dominant part of many, many civilizations, past and present. Now, the moon has a 28-day cycle, and so does the woman. And so, in many civilizations, the moon has been associated with the feminine principle, the woman. And it's natural. There is an absolute overlay of the two cycles. And so what we have are the cycles of the moon coinciding with the menstrual cycle. And the cycles of the moon are like this. You start off with a dark moon, and then you begin with the new moon. And as the new moon progresses, it goes into what we call the full moon. Between the new moon and the full moon is what we call the waxing moon. That's the moon getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it gets full. And then after the moon is full, it goes into the waning stage where it gets smaller and smaller until it goes to what we call dark moon or dark night. When you understand that cycle, then you can, or what they have done in the past is that they have followed that cycle to guide many activities, daily activities, monthly activities, weekly activities. So for example, a lot of people will plant at the new moon. There have been many almanacs that show the moon cycles. And in fact, all throughout the year, these almanacs will give the moon a different name based on its appearance in the heavens and based on the season that it's associated with. And every moon has a different character because of the planetary influences around them. So for example, if there is a ritual to be done, the wise men, the elders will know that certain rituals for bringing things in to your life need to be done around the new moon, because the new moon is gaining energy and momentum and size as it gets towards the full moon. If there are rituals to remove things from your life, then people will choose to do it in the waning phase of the moon, because the moon is getting weaker and weaker in terms of its intensity. There is a belief that there's a lot of spiritual energy associated with the moon, and therefore they look at the appearance of the moon to tell them that the moon is, is getting stronger. When the moon is at its darkest, or it doesn't exist in the sky, in the heavens, they knew instinctively that the spiritual energies were at their lowest. And so they would probably not do rituals in the dark of the moon. Likewise, people also use the moon to determine, when they plant, when they cut their hair, and things like that. When you move house, when you start construction, things like that have always been determined by the phase of the moon. There are some cultures that are so in tune with the moon that they can even decide or determine, based on the moon phase and the menstrual cycle, when to produce or when to have intercourse so that they can produce a boy or a girl, what foods to eat associated with the moon to get a boy or a girl. Those wisdom are probably lost now, but there were times when humanity was so in tune with the natural cycles that they were able to do that. They were always fixed on the heavens, and the wise ones, the elders, the shamans in the tribes would be able to tell their leaders, do not go to war until the moon is full, or do not go to war until the moon is dark. Do not start your journey during a dark moon, or begin your voyage when the moon is in its first quarter. So many, many practices and decisions were made based on how the moon would flow. It's actually something that people should take into consideration as they're living their lives, because this is how you synchronize and align with natural cycles rather than the artificial cycles. So look into it. Look into the phases of the moon. Correlate your moods, because let me tell you something. Your moods are very much determined by the phases of the moon. Hospitals will be able to tell you straight up that there are more cases of people coming in with mental issues around the full moon. There are more car accidents around the full moon because people's emotions are heightened. So the moon not only determines the energetics spiritually, but they also influence the tides, the water. Tides are higher during the full moon. So also are our emotional tides when the moon is moving through the phases. And of course, your emotional tides will determine how you will operate in the spirit realm. So they're all tied together. So also, should we begin now to not just look at the moon cycles, but also the solar cycles. We now have the technology available to us to look at space weather and look at what the sun is doing. There are solar cycles, there are solar flares, and if you watch, you will start to see a pattern where the solar cycles are concerned. So I think it's advisable for people to study both, do the research on both, and integrate both the lunar cycles and the solar cycles in their everyday life and when they choose to do things. Death and its impact on those left behind. Death is one of those things that all of us have at some point in time or the other will have to face. And even though life involves death and everybody knows it, there is still always a lot of chaos and shock and sadness and grief around death. I believe in Western society that death is very ego-driven. And let me break that down for you. When death takes place, we tend to only think about how we feel about the death, how we feel about being left behind, how we feel about not having the person around anymore. There is never ever a thought about that soul that has departed. And I think we need to start to move back towards that soul and where they are. And if we would step back for a moment and not think about ourselves and we assess the timeline, we will see the signs that the soul has completed their mission. In more Eastern-based philosophies, there is a belief that a soul has been here before and that every soul that soul interacts with was preset or preordained. And that once the soul has completed its mission, they depart. And if you really think about it, even a child, a baby that has come into the world and lives only 2 days, that soul has come into the world. There's so many souls that were waiting for that baby to be born. And then when that soul departs, there's so many other souls that are impacted by its departure. There's so many other souls whose life trajectory is completely altered by the departure of that soul, even though the soul only lived 1 day. So we have to think about death from the perspective of the soul and whether they have in fact completed their mission. I'll give an example. My father departed in 2019. He departed on his birthday, his 70th birthday. And there was a part of me that was like, why? He wasn't finished. He had so many things to do. He had so many plans. He shared them with me. Yet as the days after his death passed, I was able to look at the level of completion. He had actually completed his mission on time and with such precision. Everything that he had done was done with precision. And even his departure and the length of time between his illness and his actual departure gave everyone in the family an opportunity to gather around him and to resolve certain issues before his soul departed. And so even when there is a tragic end of life, we have to think about that soul and what they intended to happen after they departed. A fast car driver, it will give peers and other family members cause to think or to curtail their speed. Someone who dies of a heart attack, it's going to make other family members take care of their health a little bit more so that they can avoid a heart attack. Cancers, when cancers happen and someone dies from them, everybody around that person starts to take their health just a little bit more seriously. They start to research what are the causes, and it causes a whole set of persons to change their lifestyle, their eating habits, the things they consume, and what they do, the level of stress they take on. They're able to look at that person's life and say, she was so dedicated to her job. Maybe some people will say perhaps she was a little too dedicated. She gave no time for herself. She didn't care for herself enough. And so there's a whole group of people that are now going to put self-care as a priority. So what I'm saying is that death has a purpose in getting the souls that are left behind to take a strong, hard look at themselves, at their interactions, and at living each moment just so much more in the presence. So in assessing this whole matter of death, what we need to do is look at the soul that has gone and also look at how it makes you feel. Death causes a lot of sadness. Sometimes it breaks our heart. But when our heart gets broken, what happens? We are able to pour out more love, and we are also able to accept more love. So the heart breaks so that it can receive more love and give more love. So let us think about that for a moment. Also, when there is a death, there is a space that's left behind. Someone who did not expect to step into that space invariably has to step into that space. So sometimes death creates an opening for someone to step into their power or step into a confidence or into a role that they never thought they'd be able to step into. There is a couple and one dies. The other invariably has to step into the role of playing their role plus the other person's role. It strengthens them. Many, many times, death comes as a way of strengthening the souls left behind to play a different role, to play the role of a mentor, to share experiences about that person's life to others in a way that will benefit a larger number of persons. So I want us to all think about death in a little bit different way. Yes, we should grieve the person that has departed, but perhaps we should look more at how the Africans do it. They celebrate. It's not that they're celebrating the death. What they're celebrating is the life of the person. And when you just shift the narrative just that little bit and say we celebrate the life of the person that has departed, and we celebrate the fact that we actually got an opportunity for our lives to intersect and for them to influence me and for me to influence them, then the whole thing takes on a different complexion and you're able to value all the moments that you spent with the person that has departed. And you possibly have the opportunity of valuing every moment with every person that you do have around. So death really has many roles, and it's an opportunity for us to convert that pain to power.